Hey everyone, welcome Razzballers to a very special edition of our weekly fantasy basketball podcast. Today's edition, other than talking about some Jimmy Butler stuff, is going to be totally committed to talking Dynasty hoops. We're going to be talking about all the rookies and the rankings for this year, this season, who's going to help you in fantasy, who should you wait on. We'll get into all of that. So to help us with that, we have two Dynasty experts. We have our resident Dynasty expert from across the pond, Craig Bozic.
How you doing, Brent? Yeah, good to be here. A little bit more awake this week, primarily helped by the Jets starting a couple of hours ago. But yeah, ready for this.
Sam Darnold fever has spread across the ocean, so everybody's caught it.
So far.
And Baker Mayfield is in the game, so just a heads up on that. And then not only that, but we have double the Dynasty brain power tonight. We have a special guest from #Basketball, Jordan Schultz.
Hey, how are you guys doing? I am excited to be back here. I've kind of been knocked out the last few weeks, so it's good to get back in here and start talking some hoops, getting into my process to get ready for the show, watching a little bit of film and going through the stats again. It makes me excited for basketball to get here. We got, preseason starting in like 8 days or something like that. So I'm just excited to have some real basketball to watch again soon.
It's only a matter of time before some fantasy expert is getting a front office job with one of these teams with all the tape and everything we just sit around watching for free. So Jordan, why don't you tell us a little bit about your site and what you guys offer over there at #Basketball and kind of how you got started into fantasy basketball?
Yeah, so as far as when I got started, 5-6 years ago now, I just I realized there wasn't really a lot going on that was covering the Dynasty market. There was a few kind of websites here and there, so I just started putting out my own rankings, and then from there I kind of built it into a website. I have a newspaper background way back, and so I started writing a little bit on there and then devolved into a podcast, and eventually I moved over to #Basketball. They definitely gave me a chance to get my words out to more people, I guess, if you want to say that. And so now I'm over there. I do my sets of rankings over there. So I do a set of head-to-head 9-cat rebuilding and contending Dynasty rankings, as well as some rookie rankings that we're going to be talking about today. As far as what we do over there, I mean, we have tons of tools. We have like a Yahoo trade analyzer that's in the works. We got basically some my playbook type things that are coming out. There's all sorts of tools that Joey's building. Really, any type of tool you're looking for over there, it's on the way, or if you get a hold of him, he'll build it. But we're really trying to be a fantasy basketball go-to this year. We do a little bit on the Dynasty side, but they really, for your redraft league, they have a lot of good stuff over there you should check out. But yeah, that's kind of what I do. That's about it.
Yeah, we have a bunch of tools over here at Razzball too. We also have stuff to help you with your draft. So, and the jokes are starting already. So Jordan, why don't you kick it off since you're the special guest? Or did you want to plug the website at #basketball.com?
Yeah, I mean, #basketball.com. On top of fantasy, we have, full NBA writers, WNBA writers. And I don't know if I mentioned it, I do a podcast as well for them, #Dynasty Fantasy Basketball. But yeah, I mean, we really do a little bit of everything over there. But yeah, #basketball, that's all there.
That's all. You can never have enough fantasy sites to visit, and I mean, the more information you get, the more you're going to dominate your league. That's for sure.
It really is a golden era for that. There's so like you guys are on there. Of course, Josh Lloyd over Red Rock. There's so many good fantasy basketball analysts right now. It's really kind of turning into a golden era of it. I love it. There's so much to consume every day.
Yeah, it's great. And I think, did I see Josh Lloyd doing some YouTube stuff, or is that? Another
Josh has been doing it for a while now, hasn't he?
Yeah, I think I saw him doing some NBA stuff.
I think what I like Jordan sort of hit it on the head. I think that there is a bit of a golden age at the moment, and it covers such a wide range. You've got, the guys at Step In are doing some more, not strictly fantasy stuff, but, the college info that's readily available out there is phenomenal. But the thing that I find, probably a little bit more so than, say, football is there's so much respect across the industry. I feel like with fantasy basketball, I think it's a bit more we're all in it together rather than sort of competitors, if that makes sense.
I think especially with I think a lot of us all get drawn to sites like #basketball and Razzball.com because you get sick of the ESPN, the CBSs, the Yahoos. I mean, it's so generic. You look at their waiver wire suggestions, and in any league I'm in, those guys have been picked up long ago or got drafted usually. It's just, and their rankings are just usually just terrible. And so sometimes you'll look at rankings on our site, or you'll look at rankings on someone like #basketball and wonder, like, what are these guys thinking? Yahoo had this guy up at like number 10. But when you actually get in and you play the league, you'll realize, like, wow, Razzball, #basketball, they knew what they were talking about. Yahoo really had no idea. So, Jordan, why don't you kick us off? We wanted to talk in the beginning here about the Jimmy Butler requesting a trade. What are your thoughts? I mean, I guess he said Clippers, Nets, and Knicks, which makes a lot of sense because he wants to be in a big market. He likes the ripped jeans and the fashion look, so he wants to be somewhere where that's all going down. But he didn't say the Lakers. So is he avoiding LeBron? Is this part of a grand conspiracy, or what's going on here with Jimmy Butler?
So, a little background about me. I am a Bulls fan. Unfortunately, it's been a rough little bit of stretch, but we have a little bit of optimism this year. So seeing him come out and demand a trade, where he's wanting to get that max contract next year, where if he completes a sign and trade to one of those teams, he's going to get the 5-year, $190 million contract. Seeing that and then looking at what we have instead, we got Laurie, Chris Dunn, who looks pretty good, although he's a bit older, and of course Zach LaVine, if he can bounce back.
Who's going to be an all-star this year? I've been predicting every week in the podcast.
I 100 hope so, but just looking at that, you can't help but smile a little bit when looking at what we're paying those three combined, even with Zach LaVine's big contract. It pales in comparison to what Jimmy Butler is about to get. And this now is, 2 locker rooms that it seems like he's kind of rubbed the wrong way. And if you go back and read my tweets, like I was very upset at the time when we traded Jimmy Butler away. I was an emotional Bulls fan, but in the end, it's really kind of worked out. But as far as for what it means for the Timberwolves, it's really interesting. I'm one of the last standing Andrew Wiggins fans in the world, so I'm excited to see what can happen if he can get a little bit more of a chance to handle the ball again if they do move Butler. But I'm not sure that the trade gets done anytime soon. It doesn't sound like Thibs is really in a big push to break up the Timberwolves. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there.
Yeah, for sure. Craig, what were your thoughts when you saw this going down?
Well, I don't think it was really a big surprise to anyone. The thing that really I find particularly interesting now is, does Cat become a real contender for number 1 overall selection now for you guys? I mean, his numbers without Jimmy Butler are pretty outstanding. I mean, we all know he's one of the most, if not the most durable big man in the league. But if Butler moves, Karl-Anthony Towns has got to be serious consideration now for number 1 overall pick, I think.
Craig, let me stop you right there. More importantly, does this make my selection of Andrew Wiggins in the 9th round of our expert draft look like an absolute steal now at this point?
Not at all. Unlike you boys, I can't get on board Andrew Wiggins for fantasy. He's pretty much a negative contributor for his position in just about every category outside of scoring, and might just about hold his own in 3 points, I guess. Everything is just so hollow with Andrew Wiggins when it comes to fantasy that I just have absolutely no interest whatsoever. He's just one of those guys I find which is a bit of fool's gold, if you like. We were talking about this the other week, weren't we, when we were talking about guys who score points and not do a lot else. And, Wiggins hurts both percentages, gets the points, and just, maybe a 3 or 1.2 threes or something a game. Outside of that, everything's pretty much a negative contributor for his position. But it's good to see Jimmy Butler say, he's clearly going where the cap space is. I mean, yes, they're big markets in New York and LA, but the Nets, the Knicks, the Clippers, all in outstanding cap situations next year. And I wonder if there's a little bit of he wants to kind of go the LeBron route and have a little bit of a bit of a say of who comes to town, and I'm sure that will all be part of the negotiations as well, won't it?
He wants to be the Batman of the team.
Yeah, I think so. Sort of build the right team around him. I mean, personally, I'd love to see him go to the Knicks, but I don't. From everything that I read, it doesn't look like the Knicks are willing to pay anything for him in terms of trade assets, because they feel they have a real shot at getting in, for nothing next year. I say for nothing, obviously the big contract, but without giving up any assets. But I think Knicks fans, they deserve something like this. I'm just not sure whether it will be this season or whether they'll, get that shot in the off season. But this is the NBA. Remember, let's expect the unexpected. Who predicted Paul George to stay in Oklahoma? Who predicted him to go there in the first place? Kawhi ended up going to Toronto. The NBA is unpredictable, so I don't think we can completely just turn around and say, well, it's definitely going to be one of these three teams. I think there's going to be a few twists and turns, if not in the short term, certainly next summer when it comes around to his actual free agency.
Jordan, was it a dick move on Jimmy Butler's part, making Tibbs fly all the way to LA just to tell him he wanted to trade? I mean, couldn't he just text him that?
Yeah, 100%. That's what I'm saying. Like, Jimmy Butler has now done this to 2 locker rooms. Like, I've seen it firsthand. Well, not firsthand, obviously, but as a fan, I've seen that happen once already, so I'm not shocked at all to hear things like that. I think Craig hit it right on the head where he wants to do a little bit of his own LeBroning there. I don't remember who it was that tweeted it out that the Lakers, he kind of lost the appeal toward the Lakers once they did sign LeBron. So I think in his mind, he is a LeBron stopper and he can go up against him one-on-one, and he wants to try and build his squad, try and go after him, go after the Golden States. I think he really does have, that big of an ego. To be an NBA player, you have to. But I think he's really banking on that, like you said, going to the spots with cap space, the teams that have, the room to get 1 or 2 big names. So I do think that's exactly what's happening there.
I mean, is it just a coincidence that Clippers, Nets, and Knicks do have a little bit of cap space? Because, I mean, it does seem like he's in LA or New York bound, regardless. It just so happens it's a good time, I guess, where they're positioned. But do any of them have enough to trade? I mean, is D'Angelo Russell coming back with Rondé Hollis-Jefferson enough? Tim Hardaway Jr. and Lance Thomas and a 2019 first-round pick enough from the Knicks? Is Tobias Harris enough from the Clippers? Craig, what do you think?
I think that all of those are kind of best-case scenarios of what the Timberwolves will get. I think that, the trade request has pretty much dampened the value. Obviously, teams are aware that he wants out. I think there's going to be a lot of lowballing in negotiations. Someone's going to give up something of value, of course. Jimmy Butler's absolutely fantastic player that's going to add wins to any franchise. But I think that, Butler showing his card has kind of put the Timberwolves in a bit of a difficult position. So it's going to be interesting to see. But I don't necessarily think we're going to see a situation where I'm a Timberwolves fan, strictly speaking, from the NBA. Baylor will always come first, but if I had to pick an NBA team, it would be the Timberwolves. So
the Timberwolves.
Timberwolves. So I'm a little bit disappointed, that it's kind of come out this way. And I think that, we're going to suffer a bit because of it. So I'd like to see us get some value. I just don't think it will necessarily be what most fans think it will be in terms of value-wise.
Well, that's the big thing that's kind of working against those teams that are going to go after him. If they wait a year and just try and sign him to a max deal in free agency, they're looking at something closer to 4-year, $140, $150 million. Whereas if they do a sign-in trade, he's eligible for that 10-year, the 10-year extension or whatever that's called, where that contract never jumps up to 5-year, $190 million, where he's getting over $40 million a year those last couple of years on the deal as I want to say like a 34, 35-year-old. So I don't know if there's a big push for these teams to give up a huge package to go get him when they could just kind of play it out, see what happens, and try and go after him next year in free agency at a much lower number.
And Jimmy Butler's no spring chicken. If you're looking at a 4 or 5 year deal. I mean, what's he, 29?
Yeah, 28, 29. Sorry about that. That was my dog.
No problem. We usually have a fourth person anyway, so that works. So, I mean, anything else you guys really want to hit on with Jimmy Butler? Obviously, is there going to be Jordan, do you think we're going to see like another team come out of the woodwork, like a Boston or, I mean, or Miami? Is there going to be a surprise team that jumps in on this?
Miami is the one team you could
Philly?
see making a move. But I don't know. I don't think that we're going to see a trade anytime soon. If we do see a trade, it's going to be closer to the All-Star break, or the trade deadline would be my guess. I don't think a lot of these teams are in a big push to go get him on a one-year deal unless, you're one of those teams like Oklahoma City who's willing to take a swing and, count on your culture bringing him back, like they did with Paul George. But I don't know. I don't know if many teams are willing to do that, especially after seeing the way he's kind of forced his way out of two situations. It's kind of tough to see. I don't know.
Craig, does
I've got a question. I've got a
yeah,
question for you, Jordan.
Yeah.
With the Jimmy Butler news, I mean, I've got your rankings here.
Mm-hmm.
Does it potentially move up Keita, Bates-Diop, and Josh Okogie for you in terms of your rankings at all?
Yeah. I mean, I would think it would move them up a little bit. I still don't know. For your redraft leagues, I just still don't think they're going to play any role as long as Thibs is coaching there as a rookie. But yeah, Okogie more than Keita, Bates-Diop. I do like Josh Okogie quite a bit. So I would say definitely on him. Bates-Diop, probably a few spots, but not as big of a jump as you would get with Okogie.
Interesting. Okay.
Hey, what do you guys, just while we're on the Timberwolves really quick, I have a personal question, because what do you guys think of Gorgui Dieng this year? He's got such a fantasy-friendly game, but he went from like 30 minutes to 16 minutes with Taj Gibson. Now, Taj Gibson is obviously getting older. I don't know that he can log those type of minutes. Is Dieng going to be fantasy relevant this year?
I think the problem with Gorgui Dieng is as soon as Thibs went there, he's pretty much pushed him just to a backup centre role. And when you're backing up Karl Anthony Towns, has he ever missed an NBA game, Towns? I don't think he has he?
No, I don't think so.
It's really going to limit, the opportunity that he's going to get because doesn't seem committed to really playing much at the power forward position either. So unless injury sort of hits, I think it's going to be another one of those kind of lost seasons there for Gorgui.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to primarily play minutes as a backup center, which, puts him behind Towns. I think you'll see Tolliver take a lot of those backup minutes at the power forward spot, and Taj is going to play a ton of minutes again for Thibs. So I think if there was, if one of those guys was to get injured, I could see Dieng stepping into a role where he's relevant, in those 12 teams and especially those 14-team leagues. But as far as just like a standard redraft league, he's a waiver guy. Maybe you stream him a little bit here if you need blocks or something like that. But as it sits now, I have a hard time imagining he comes close to the production he was able to put up earlier in his career.
So it's really wishful thinking then to think that Luol Deng and Gorgui Dieng could be playing together at the same time and have a little Deng and Dieng going on?
I think Deng is definitely going to get minutes as long as Thibs is coaching there, but I don't know about Dieng.
Jang it. All right. Well, let's move on to the reason we're all here. So Jordan, just like Craig over on Razzball, Jordan's specialty is the younger players, college guys, dynasty pickups. But specifically for this podcast, we're going to look at rookie rankings for your 2018-2019 NBA rookies, which I've been really looking forward to this because I can't remember NBA fantasy drafts in any real recent memory where as many rookies got taken as high as they did and with the frequency that they did this year. So there's a lot of potential impact guys and even guys sitting on the waiver wire that could have an impact. So why don't we focus on the top 30? We'll do a reverse countdown just to keep everyone in suspense as to who the top rookie might be, and start at number 30, Jordan.
Yeah, I'll just kind of read down. I think we'll start off with 30 through 21. I think is what we kind of agreed. And then I'll circle back around and talk about a couple of guys that I'm really kind of liking in that range there. Okay. So I'll just go ahead and start reading them down. So at number 30, I got Chandler Hutchinson. I had him quite a bit higher until they signed Jabari and then brought back Levine. That kind of dampened his look a little bit. Number 29, I got Svi Mykhailiuk. I'm sure I just butchered that last name, but Svi Mania from the Los Angeles Lakers. Number 28, Anfernee Simons with the Portland Trail Blazers, local team out here. Number 27, got Mo Wagner. Number 26, Jerome Robinson. Number 25, Dzanan Musa. 24, Josh Okogie. 23, Aaron Holiday. 22, Troy Brown. And 21, Grayson Allen. I guess before I kind of jump back in there, is there anything that kind of stands out to you guys one way or the other?
First, Craig, can we get your pronunciation of Svi Mykhailiuk, or just so we all know how to say it?
No, Jordan wasn't too far off. It's Svi Mykhailiuk.
I was close. I was watching videos before, and I felt really confident, and then when I got on the spot, I got stage fried a little bit.
So it's myself. Sviatoslav? Is that right?
What's interesting is if you hear the pronunciation when he was playing in Europe, sort of I suppose high school age, if you like, before he went to college, you hear quite differing pronunciations of his name, but Svi Mykhailiuk, yeah.
Every time I hear someone say the name Anfernee, I always think they're like yelling at me, like, answer me. Like, what did I say? All right, so who jumps out at you? Or Craig, do you want to? Yeah, I think Jordan was asking Craig. Who jumps out at you in this 30 through 21?
Okay, so in sort of comparison to my own rankings, the biggest discrepancies, I suppose, that I've got in there as such is I've got Dzanan Musa at 17 as opposed to your 25. Obviously, the recent news about the ankle or the Achilles injury that he has recently got in the World Cup qualifiers probably puts 25 at more realistic sort of price tag there, I suppose. But Dzanan Musa is a guy that I like a lot, and I have him. I've got Aaron Holiday a bit higher as well. So those are the two guys, but that I'm probably a little bit different on to you in terms of rankings. But again, rankings in a nutshell can mean many things. So I see Keita Bates-Diop's not inside your top 30. I've got Bates-Diop at 22, I think it is. So there's another one that we're differing on a bit.
Who fell out of the top 30? Let those guys in.
Keita Bates-Diop was my number 31. I got Bruce Brown at 32 and Dante DiVincenzo at 33. Those are my next three out.
Okay.
And the last one for me is I've got Omari Spellman way higher. I think you've got him at
34. He's my next one out.
34, and I've got him at 19. I just love the situation Spellman's in Atlanta. I think he's got a really fancy-friendly game. I really like the motor, the way that he can stretch the floor. I mean, he is a bit undersized in height at 6'9", but he's got good weight on him at 260 pounds. Can stretch the floor. He is an efficient shooter, or was really efficient in college. The combination of the quick hands, likes the contact. I don't project sort of potential fantasy superstar, but I think he's going to be one of those guys that, given sort of 20, 22, 23 minutes, could put up, good fantasy stats and be one of those sort of undervalued guys. So for me, they're probably the biggest differences, I suppose, I've got in there. So who was it you wanted to focus on, Jordan?
Yeah, one of those guys you already mentioned, and that is Musa, where I have him at number 25. And like you said, the rankings, I guess, for me, I wouldn't necessarily go straight down a list on these as in rankings if you're drafting them. I would look at them more in tiers, where I would have Musa kind of in the same tier as, a couple guys ahead of him, like Josh Okogie, Aaron Holiday, like you mentioned, maybe even throw him in there with Troy Brown. They're all kind of close to that same tier for me. So if you wanted to go, one of those guys over the other, I couldn't fault you. A lot of it comes down to what kind of team you're building. But Musa,
a lot of competition for playing time for Musa, though, in Brooklyn.
I mean, in the interim, yeah, you have DeMarre Carroll there, but he's on an expiring deal. I think that he's the guy that you're looking at more for next year. I don't know how much time he plays here, especially if he does come back a little slow from this ankle injury. It doesn't sound like it's anything too serious. But I think he's the guy you're looking at more of next year, where they, is Allen Crabbe, is his deal off the books this year as well too?
Is it one more year, isn't it? I thought.
Yeah, one more year. Okay,
you could be right. I've got it in my head that he's still got one more year from that terrible contract he signed at Portland.
That 4 years, $74 million.
And then the Brooklyn still traded for him after they got out of that contract when Portland matched. It's crazy. I still don't really understand that whole saga right there.
What is it about Musa that you like?
Yeah, he's got one more year. Crabbe will be a free agent in 2020, unrestricted.
Okay, so I think that's kind of when you're really looking at it when Crabbe and after this year when Carroll's off the books, then you're really looking at kind of maybe like Karras, Levert, Dzanan Musa, 2-3 combo down the road.
I think isn't Hollis Jefferson going to be a restricted free agent too?
Yes, he was in Justice Winslow's class, so yeah, they'll be up for extensions after this year. But as far as Musa, what I like about him, he's a 6'9" forward that's got a little bit of shown some flashes as a point forward. He's handling the ball quite a bit. I believe playing for Bosnia in FIBA competition right now, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
Like I said, he's handling the ball. He's running the point for him. He's scoring. He's showing some really good things. And of course, that's a little bit lower level of competition, but you see the flashes of what could make him so special. As Craig mentioned, he did hurt his ankle, but it doesn't sound super serious. But what I really like about him is he's going to be able to play multiple positions. I already kind of mentioned you got DeMarre Carroll coming off the books after this year. One thing he really does well is he excels at getting to the rim and scoring, so he's going to really need to beef up and get stronger to be able to continuously do that at a consistent pace in the NBA. But I just think the mismatches he can create, the fact that you can probably run him out there offensively anywhere 1 through 4 depending on the lineup, I just think there's a lot of upside there. And I'm a big fan of the Nets, what they've done the last few years. I'm a big fan of Coach Atkinson. So the ceiling is high on this guy for sure.
Yeah, and a trade for Butler could open up a few spots too, because Carroll's one of the guys who could go over in a trade. Hollis Jefferson, so that they could, if they do a kind of a 3-for-1 type of deal, that could maybe open up some time later in the season.
Yeah, that's true.
The thing I like about Musa, I'm with you on Musa. I know we've talked a lot, I think, over the last month, I suppose, Jordan, about this guy anyway. But I like the situation that he's been put in. Like you said, he has the ability to play the point forward role. I think he got 9 assists last week in one of the World Cup qualifiers. But he's a fierce competitor. You watch him in Europe last year. This guy doesn't like to lose. And I think that the fact that he is so aggressive on the offensive end, can put the basketball on the floor, I think it's something that the Nets really crave, to be honest with you. He's got an exceptionally quick first step. He's not a particularly great athlete, but neither's Luka Doncic, and he's still a special talent. But he can score from all three levels of the floor. The defensive side of things, he's not particularly strong. But in fantasy, he's, for me, going to provide a lot of very positive things. And given the fact that, we heard it before with Mario Hezonja being, this arrogant kind of character. Musa's a bit arrogant, I suppose, but I kind of think he's got a bit more to back it up with on the offensive end.
Hey, so is Kobe Bryant and Michael Jordan. They were known for being pretty arrogant. Didn't hurt them.
Hot take. Yeah, he's calling Musa the next MJ. I love it.
Yeah. When you see that on the cover of ESPN, don't freak out.
But to go back for a second, you look at what Sean Marks has done with this, with the limited picks and everything is with this Nets roster. I think is a real credit to him and the organisation actually, and I think that part of the attraction with Musa is that he offers something that they don't really already have, and I think that. Even in the short term, provided this ankle injury isn't too bad, I could see some maybe not out the gate, but I could see some fantasy relevance this season. He is used to playing against professionals. He does believe in his own abilities, and the fact that he's so aggressive on the offensive end, I think, and the pace that the Nets play at, I think that there is going to be opportunity there for him to have some value this season. And like I always say, fantasy and real life is two different entities, and I think Musa has the potential to be a much better fantasy player than what he is actually in terms of an effective real life player because of the lack of defense.
So does he project just sort of as that kind of modern day wing, like Josh Jackson, like kind of multi-positional type of guy? I'm not as familiar with him.
It's different to Josh Jackson. I mean, Josh Jackson's I can't even say his name. Josh Jackson isn't the level of shooter that Dzanan Musa is. I mean,
I don't think he's the playmaker he is going to be either.
No, and okay. Musa is. Musa likes contact. He thrives in contact. He doesn't shy away from contact at all. I think when you look at sort of historically with Josh Jackson, when he went to Kansas, it took him a while to adjust there. Good half a season to really get the confidence and to thrive in contact. Same with Phoenix. He was very tentative when he was driving and cutting, and then we saw back end of the season that it come to him. I don't see that with Musa. Musa is a guy that doesn't fear the contact. He invites it. He draws a lot of the fouls, and a lot of it is because of how aggressive he's willing to be on the offensive end. So, but you're right in a sense that the ability to play. This is a guy that I can't see him playing the point guard in the NBA, but there is the potential there in certain rotations, especially on the offensive end, for him to play anywhere from the 2 to 4. So that versatility can only help.
I know this is hard to do, and you guys probably hate this question, but I like it and think of me as just your average Joe Schmo when it comes to like rookies. But what's a good just comparison player for a guy like Musa? It kind of helps put in my head what I'm looking at when I'm paying attention to him. It's like when you mention a 6'9" playmaker kind. I mean, it almost sounds kind of similar to like a Jimmy Butler or something. I mean, that's obviously pretty high praise, but
more of a secondary ball handler than a primary point, probably in the NBA, like Craig was saying. I'm trying to think like some. I don't know. I'm really bad at on the spot player comps. I don't know if
I'm not a fan of.
Well, if something comes to mind, let me know. One of the guys that jumped out at me from that top 10 that I wanted you guys to go a little more in depth on was Aaron Holiday. It seems like obviously his brothers have done pretty well in the NBA. And he seems to be in a good spot, but with Oladipo and Evans and Darren Collison there in Indiana, there's a lot of guys who could play the point guard position. Is there going to be playing time for Aaron Holiday this season? And is he going to be able to put up? I know he's a little undersized. Is he going to be able to put up kind of fantasy relevant numbers?
Also, I thought of a good player comp. Better shooting Kyle Anderson. How does that sound?
Yeah.
Would you agree on that, Craig?
Yeah, I hate comps.
So Manu Ginobili?
The only comp that I would use out of this draft class that I feel comfortable with is Mitchell Robinson to DeAndre Jordan, but that just absolutely glares out at me. Sort of outside of that, I'm not really a comps guy, to be honest. I think every player has their own unique strengths and weaknesses, really.
It just helps me visualize. I'm more of a visual, one of those lower level thinking people that I need to visualize who I'm looking at. So back, Jordan, Aaron Holiday, do you see time for him this year? And does he have a game that could translate well to fantasy?
As far as a game that could translate well to fantasy, I do think so. I think he's going to be a guy that could score a little bit, knock down some threes, get you some decent bench point guard assists, a couple steals here and there. I don't know that he gets much time this year, especially with the addition of Tyreke Evans. He was a guy that I was really high on in the initial draft spot. I thought, he's a Corey Joseph injury away from, having meaningful minutes as a ball handler running the offense.
I know DeAndre Ayton, I remember during the draft, was really hoping the Suns were going to grab him with that other pick they had.
Modern player. I don't know if there's going to be any room from this year, especially where the Pacers are. They're going to be good this year. I think they'll be, challenging for the top of the East for sure. You got Oladipo that can handle the ball there. Darren Collison, who's still there for one more year. Corey Joseph's going to play some minutes. And then, like I said, Tyreek's going to be that secondary ball handler for them. So I just don't know how much of the pie is going to be left for them this year. But he is a guy that I'm looking at, years 2 and 3. I do think there's a chance he can carve out, a nice 18 to 20 minute role and then, hopefully move up from there.
Craig, what do you think about Holiday?
Yeah, I kind of agree with most of that. I think that the thing that concerns me in the short term is that, the lack of size is going to take quite an adjustment period, I think, for him in the NBA. So I don't expect too much in the short term. In the long term, I like the basketball IQ. I think a lot of what I see, a lot of the offensive decision making at this point of his career is quite predictable, and I think that in the short term will be found out in the NBA. So I think it's going to take a bit of time to develop, but he does have excellent quickness. His decision making is strong. So I think there's a good chance that given time, he could be a starting caliber point guard. I think in the short term though, just be wary of the size, and obviously. He is sort of, I wouldn't say buried on the depth chart, but given the pace of situation, like Jordan said, I don't think they're going to be in a rush to throw him out there.
So before we move on to the next 10, who, and I'll let both you guys jump in on this, which of these guys do you think has the best chance of being fantasy relevant this season? If any.
I think I will honestly go with fantasy relevant. We're talking like
that they could end up being someone's grabbing them off waivers at some point this season, and then they could, help a team.
I think Troy Brown is definitely in that mix. Grayson Allen, if there's a few injuries there. So yeah, I'll say Troy Brown and Grayson Allen, which is kind of a cop out as they're my number 21 and 22 in my rankings, but I really do believe that.
Hey, even if a number 22 ranked rookie plays any meaningful fantasy minutes in a season, that's a pretty big deal. Craig, what do you think? Similar?
Dzanan Musa for me, if he isn't too hurt. Agree with the Grayson Allen call. I think the fit was just too perfect, really, and it was encouraging in summer league to see them put the ball in his hands as well.
He was way more athletic than I remember at Duke. I saw some of his layup line dunking that he was doing.
I did a complete 360 on him. I was a North Carolina fan for college, so I was firmly on the F. Grayson Allen train. But he, like you said, he showed out at summer league. He showed some good stuff. I was a lot better playmaker and rebounder than I realized he was.
Yeah.
Well, his combine scores were impressive in regards to athleticism as well. I think it kind of took, maybe not everybody, certainly took me a bit by surprise, what he scored at the combine on some of the athletic testing.
You think with all the tape we have on him, too, for 4 years in college, and people are still surprised at what he can do. That's amazing.
Yeah, I like the situation for him as well. I think Utah's a great fit. Maybe in terms of just a bit of a sleeper, I think if CJ McCollum or Lillard move some point this season, maybe Anfernee Simons or Gary Trent Jr. I think one of those two have the possibility to thrive second half if given the opportunity. So it might be a bit soon for Simons, but we'll see. Definitely a guy to keep an eye on.
What about the two Lakers guys? I mean, JaVale McGee, who doesn't play a lot of minutes, has asthma. Zubac, who is obviously just kind of a plotting kind of rim protector. Is there room for Mo Wagner to get some stretch 4, stretch 5 minutes there in LA? And Svi, but he's one of the best shooters in the draft, right?
Yeah, I mean, if he can get Mo, that is, to where he's at least, a below average passable defender, I do think that he could carve out some minutes as, the stretch 4 that can shoot. I think Svi's a guy that is a sneaky pick for I think we'll talk about it a little more later, but a second half guy that could really step up and play a role just because he is such a shooter. I don't know for fantasy this year if he would do much more than just, a few points and some 3-pointers, but I do think that there's a chance for it, but I wouldn't bet on it. Has there ever been any rookies that have played big, meaningful minutes on a LeBron-led team?
Yeah, I'll let you know. I'll let you know while you're going through 20 to 11.
just to go to Mo Wagner for a sec. The thing that gives him a chance is that he offers that different dimension to Zubac and McGee. In summer league, we saw him put the basketball on the floor quite effectively inside the paint. Obviously, he's got range that the other two don't. So there are going to be certain rotations, I see, where he is going to be important for them, just in terms of stretching the floor. Whether he gets any usage out of it is another question. But, it gives him a chance, I think. Svi Mykhailiuk, I'm much lower on him than most. I know Summer League was really, really impressive. But, the hype on the kid when he was 15, 16 was unreal. And I've kind of been waiting for that for the last 3 or 4 years, and it just never really came at college. So, Summer League was impressive, but it's a different kettle of fish, knocking those threes down in the NBA to Summer League. So I'm not quite so high on him.
Jordan, you want to run down 20 through 11? And I know one of our bigger discrepancies between Jordan and Craig are coming up in these 10. So pay attention and see if you can guess which one it is.
Yeah, I was reading over his ranks right before we started, and I noticed a few of my guys I liked here were in his second half, his 16 through 30. So I'm interested to kind of see where we differ there. But all right, number 20, D'Anthony Melton. Number 19, Elie Okobo. 18, Robert Williams. After that, we got Kevin Huerter at 17, Miles Bridges at number 16, Zhaire Smith at number 15, Lonnie Walker at 14, Mitchell Robinson at 13, Collin Sexton at 12, and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander at 11.
Oh, I have a little different list here from your. We had SGA at 12, and Sexton at 9. Is that a redone pick?
It must have been, yeah. I was kind of tweaking that late until last night because I'm just getting ready to push out a new set of rankings on the website.
Okay, cool. So, could you go through 13 through 11 again?
Yeah,
So,
so 13 Mitchell Robinson, 12 Collin Sexton, 11 Shai Gilgeous-Alexander.
Okay, so Mikal Bridges, he fell into the top 10 then?
Number 10, exactly, yep.
Okay, cool. So, Jordan, who in that 10 who stands out to you? Now we're getting closer to guys who may actually contribute this year, so it's going to get interesting.
So the one guy that really jumped out to me and I think will be interesting because Craig did have him quite a bit lower was Zhaire Smith. I had him in at number 15. I've gotten him in literally every single rookie draft I've done this offseason. So I'm either seeing something nobody else isn't, or I'm really going to regret that pick in a few years. But I like Zhaire. He's good chance he's going to be out till at least December. Broken foot. Wouldn't surprise me if Philly babied him and brought him along slow and had him spend some time in the G League when he comes back.
Philly bring along someone slow? No.
Yeah, I know. It's unheard of. But what that does, or what that says to me, is that presents a nice little buy low window where I think whatever it costs to get him right now, whether that's in a draft or whether that's in a trade, I think his value, his return is going to be much higher than what it takes to get him. Obviously, the hope for him is to carve out some nice backup minutes unless JJ walks, and then they find a way to work him into the starting lineup. Wilson Chandler is expiring. JJ, of course, signed another one-year deal, and it sounds like he was close to going to Indiana this offseason, so I wouldn't say it's any foregone conclusion that he comes back next year. As far as what I like about Zhaire, I think he's going to be a really good defender almost right away. He's an absolutely freak athlete. Really kind of just came out of nowhere last year, so I think there's a little bit more upside there that could be untapped. I'm a fan of the way Philly's brought along some of their younger guys, so I'm hoping that he falls more on that Robert Covington side than that Jahlil Okafor production train, or at least growth train there. He showed some flashes of having a little bit of an improved jumper at Summer League. If he can do that consistently, that's going to be huge for him. I do think he could be a 2 to 3 year project, but I think he's going to be really special if he hits, for sure.
Craig, where'd you have Zhaire?
I've got Zhaire Smith at 24, and the reason being is there is potential there for sure, especially with the athleticism. But I think that this is a guy for me which is strictly, elite potential defender with a really, really raw offensive game.
Like an Andre Roberson type, not exact comparison, but
that's kind of where I'm at in regards to value at this point. Now, everything that Jordan said, gives him the chance to, this is a kid that I think that has a real high standard deviation in terms of outcomes for his NBA career, because the athleticism really does give him a chance to thrive. The offensive skill set is very, very raw, but again, he's still very young. And that's something, professional coaching, no Kara rule, et cetera, that you expect to see improve. I don't expect to see him in Philly this year. We saw it before with Ben Simmons with, broken foot or what have you. I don't think it makes sense for them to rush him either. Not that should hinder his value in Dynasty. I like him as an aggressive stash if your league can afford it. If you don't have to use a roster spot. I think that the floor's quite high because I think the defensive stats will be there. I just need to see more I need to see some more development on the offensive end for me to believe it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, the one thing you said that I really agree with is that the defensive numbers are going to be there, and that's part of why I do like him so much. I think that he's a guy that we could look back in 3-4 years from now and see him kind of take a Josh Richardson type ascend if he can really start to hit that jump shot. Looking at what he did in college last year, and just 28 minutes a game where a lot of these guys are playing, 30 to 34, he was able to get over a steal and a block per game, which came out to a 2.3 steal percentage and a 4.8 block percentage. So I do think that not only is he a good defender, but he's going to have those numbers to back it up, unlike, like a Klay Thompson, whose NBA presence has felt a lot more than it is in fantasy. So I think those two things right there are going to be helpful. I think he's going to be a guy that can challenge for, 0.7, 0.8 blocks from the shooting guard spot. I think he's going to be a decent rebounder from the guard position as well. So if he can just get any semblance of an NBA three-point shot and get, turn into a guy that can score a little bit, then he becomes a very interesting fantasy prospect, especially if you can get him, closer to the 24 in a rookie draft where Craig has him ranked. I would love it even more at that point.
Do you find that, like I was saying, do you agree with the point that in terms of ranking the guy, he's one of the more difficult to rank because you can make an argument almost, I think, depending on which sort of way the pendulum falls in your head, of picking him anywhere from maybe 11 to 25. Does that make sense?
Yeah, really.
I had quite a hard time ranking him because it is clear that you can see the upside there, and the athleticism really is outstanding. But the offensive game looks so raw that it just looks like there's so much work to be done. I mean, there is the potential there that this guy could be a top 10 guy easily, given the tool set that he possesses. I just think for me at this end, if you draft him, you kind of draft him with that high floor of the defensive stats in mind, more so than expecting anything offensively yet.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely fair. Like you said, your comp right now is Andre Robertson, and I'm a guy that I'm saying.
That was mine, by the way. I don't want to put words in Craig's mouth.
Yeah, exactly. But very wide outcome of what could happen with him. It's interesting. He's a guy that I'll definitely be following closely, as I do have him in, I think, 3 of my 4 leagues, and the one I don't, we just started up this year, and so he just went a few picks before I was ready to grab him.
There's been kind of a run of defensive specialists who've been fantasy relevant. Look at this year with Jordan Bell and Jonathan Isaac. Even I guess Draymond Green's like the king of that. Guys who could contribute in other areas. Ntilikina's got a chance to potentially be really fantasy relevant this year if he can just shoot a little bit. So I mean, there's definitely a place for a guy like Smith on a fantasy team. If he was to come back healthy, do you think?
I hope so.
Yeah, for sure. I think again, like we were sort of talking about earlier, it's all contextual, isn't it, in terms of how you draft, and rookies especially. You tend to find that people draft very, very differently. I would say the majority of people find lists and then draft from those. But when you look a bit closely, there is no guy in this draft that hasn't got some kind of flaw, and we all value things, and weight things in terms of value differently. So, this for me is that classic case where, the standard deviation of where you could take him in a rookie draft is just so high because of that.
There's a couple guys I want to focus on before we get onto the top 10, which is where the real beef is here. But there are a couple guys in this 20 through 11 that I have seen get drafted. Mitchell Robinson is getting picked in a lot of just regular drafts, and Collin Sexton as well. And then we'll wrap up these with your guys' comments on the Bridges boys. But as far as Mitchell Robinson and Collin Sexton go, who do you feel are they both going to be fantasy relevant? I know minutes will be there for Sexton. Robinson, it sounds like just needs minutes, and he's going to be a beast. What do you think about those two guys from a fantasy perspective, Jordan?
Yeah, Sexton's a guy. I mean, like you said, when you had looked at my rankings, at one point I'd had him up as high as 9. I really liked what I've seen, and then I went back in the pre-draft process all the way back from my very first set of rankings I put out. I had Shai Gilgeous-Alexander ahead of Sexton, and all it took was going back and watching a little bit of film on him again, and I'm like, yeah, that's right. I would much rather have Shai than Collin Sexton if we're talking long-term there. But as far as, is he going to be fantasy relevant this year, I do think that there's a good chance of that, especially if, George Hill finds himself on the move again. You hear, the Suns in talks for trying to go get a point guard. Pat Beverly's a guy you've heard mentioned. George Hill makes a lot of sense for both of them, I think. So especially if there's a move that's made, I think there's a really good chance Sexton is fantasy relevant this year. Mitchell Robinson, I would bet money, not a lot of money, but I would bet on him being fantasy relevant this year. I think Kanter is a guy that, he kind of is what he is. He's a points and rebounds guy. He's not really going to do much outside of that. Not a great defensive player. Obviously, if you can get a guy like Mitchell Robinson there, just what he does as a rim protector can change that entire defense, especially when you're projecting long-term with him next to Porzingis. That could be a nightmare to try and play against if they can get Porzingis back up healthy and Mitchell Robinson turns into the DeAndre Jordan type, player that Craig is comparing him to. So yeah, I like both of these guys. Mitchell Robinson was one of the guys I kind of had highlighted in this range that I really wanted to talk to. You wonder how much higher he would have got drafted if he went to the combine, which I think is a point Craig made when he came on the last podcast that we did together on the hashtag podcast. But there is immense upside there. That's absolutely for sure.
Craig?
Yeah, the reason they're getting drafted is the potential for the opportunity. With Mitchell Robinson, there's a guy that I see that he isn't going to need a lot of minutes for him to be fantasy relevant just because, 20 minutes a game, he could see 2 blocks per game in that. I've said it before, he's not going to have offensive plays run for him, but he's the kind of guy which is going to get his through scraps, very much like DeAndre Jordan, I suppose. And as Jordan pointed out, he's such a yin to Kanter's yang that there's going to be certain rotations that the Knicks can't have Kanter out there. So you're going to be relying on a guy like Mitchell Robinson to come in. And I think it's not unrealistic to think, especially given halfway through the season, him playing, 20, 22 minutes at times. So we'll see. But I like Mitchell Robinson. I've had him aggressively ranked for a year. He's always been inside my top 16. I think, the podcast we did maybe 2 or 3 weeks before the draft, I think Robinson I had at maybe 13 then. I think I've still got him at 12 or 13 now. So it's a guy that I've always been on and always liked. I think that he's, he's made some poor decisions, and I think that a lot of that's come through poor advice around him. He was advised to pull out the combine, and he's since fired his agent since then, because I think that's a large reason why he did fall so low, because there was so much talent in this draft that teams wanted to know what they were getting. But on a pure talent perspective, he was, a potential lottery pick. In terms of Collin Sexton, I'm quite a bit higher than what Jordan is. I think that if you draft Collin Sexton as a point guard, you're going to have to expect some efficiency issues from the off. You're not going to get elite assists. Like I've said before, this is more a natural 2-guard than a point guard in terms of the style of play that he plays. But I see no reason why he can't be like a Kyrie Irving light, if you know what I mean. I know that's a really poor comparison because, when Kyrie's healthy, we're talking about an elite player. But what I mean is you're not going to get elite assists out of the guy. But he is a tremendous athlete. He's a really, really fun guy to watch. I think he's a better shooter than what people give him credit for. The college numbers weren't great, but he was relied upon so heavily on that offense at Alabama. There was so much poor shot selection because it was almost he had to. So I think he's a better shooter than he's given credit for. I think he was a 3-point shooting contest winner out of high school, former dunk contest winner as well at the McDonald's All-American. So, yeah, there's a lot there to like. The opportunity is going to be there. I think I've got Sexton at 8 in my rankings. I just worry maybe in the long term, is there enough there for him to be a potential superstar in terms of fantasy, sort of statistically? But I like both guys in the short and long term.
Yeah, Sexton's definitely going to be an exciting player to watch. Just watching that lockdown D, he seems to take defense really seriously, which is good to see out of a younger guy. And then guys like Robinson, who are just freak athletes, are always going to be fun to watch. And the Knicks are going to be one of those teams that I drop in on once in a while this season on League Pass just to see Knox and Robinson. So why don't you've got about 10 minutes here. Jordan, you want to go through the last 10 and then you guys just, we'll just freestyle through who we like, because this last 10 has pretty much everyone was drafted in our league or in the leagues that I've been in. So I can't wait to hear what you guys think about these guys.
Yeah, so my top 10, as we mentioned before, Michael Bridges jumped in right at number 10. I have Michael Porter Jr. at number 9, Kevin Knox at number 8, Mo Bamba at number 7, Marvin Bagley at 6, Wendell Carter Jr. at number 5, Trae Young at number 4, number 3, I got Jaren Jackson Jr., number 2, DeAndre Ayton, and number 1, Luka Doncic. My kind of just quick thoughts here. Doncic is my clear number 1. I'm still on team Ayton ahead of Jaren Jackson Jr., Wendell Carter. It seems like a lot of people have kind of gone the other way on that, and I'm not quite there. At this point, it seems like Trae Young over Wendell Carter is a hot take a little bit, and I do still believe in Marvin Bagley and Michael Porter Jr. Where do your top 10 come in at, and what are your kind of general thoughts on mine, Craig?
I'm in a lot of the same shoes as you with a lot of those takes, with one significant or two significant differences. At 10, I got Mo Bamba. 9, I got Miles Bridges. 8, I've got Collin Sexton. 7, I've got Kevin Knox. 6, Wendell Carter Jr. 5, Marvin Bagley Jr. 4, Jaren Jackson Jr., all the juniors. 3, I've got DeAndre Ayton. Number 2, I've got Trae Young. And number 1, Luka Doncic. Doncic is my clear number 1 as well. He is in a tier on his own for me, I guess. Like you, I'm fully on board with Trae Young. I mean, I've got him at number 2. I've had him at number 2 for a long time, and I still believe. People look into Summer League, and I saw all the hate, and that there are a lot of Trae Young haters. But people forget that this isn't just a guy who's going to chuck up a lot of threes. I'm expecting poor efficiency from the off. But in terms of dynasty leagues, you're talking about a guy who's got the potential to be an elite scorer, elite. His court vision and his passing ability is fantastic. The range that he possesses, he's a threat to score the basket pretty much anywhere from inside the opponent's half. The space that creates behind the defense in pick and roll opportunities or passing opportunities, I don't think that can be ignored. I think it's going to be interesting to see how him and Collins and Spellman sort of partnership in the long run develops. And it's all, people forget that he put up nearly 2 steals a game in college as well. So, there's the potential there for 2, 3, possibly 4, even elite categories. Even if that comes with some warts, that's going to be, significant fantasy value, because we're talking, he's going to come in and he's going to get assists out the gate. I'm with you on Marvin Bagley Jr. I think the athleticism is unreal. I think that there's a lot of work to be done with the footwork on the defensive end, but anyone who watched him in Summer League, the athleticism really played on the defensive end, and people look at the 0.7 or 0.8 blocks it was at college that he put up and say, well, this guy can't defend, he's not going to be he's not going to contribute in the defensive stats. I disagree. I could see a significant jump to that, given full-time professional coaching. His leaping ability was causing problems in Summer League, and I can see the same in the NBA as well.
But even the fact, Craig, that the Kings would consider playing someone of Bagley's size at the 3 just speaks to his athleticism, right?
Yeah, I've got to believe it before I see it, really, with that one. But again, this is the Sacramento Kings, so let's not rule anything out. I just think when you've got that size, that athleticism, yes, he is ultra one-handed. He's going to have to learn how to finish with both. To really maximise his potential, but I think the upside is huge with Bagley. I mean, the one fantasy drawback is that he isn't a very good free throw shooter, but the shot form isn't that bad. If there's a guy that could, that is a poor free throw shooter that could improve, Bagley could be that guy. So again, another one of those guys. Like I say, with all of these rookies, know what it is that you draft, and if you draft Bagley, the long-term potential with there is. He could be elite in points, could be elite in boards, could be elite in field goal percentage. But, that free throw percentage is going to, potentially be an issue in the long run for fantasy.
So let me jump in real quick, Craig. So a big difference that I heard that between you and Jordan and people who are in Dynasty leagues listening to this, so this could make a big difference in who they go with. Are the Bridges, bro? Like, you had Miles Bridges in the top 10, and Jordan has him at 16.
Correct. Yep.
Where's the discrepancy there? That's almost a bigger jump than the Zhaire Smith.
Well, which Bridges do you want to start with, Brent?
Well, Miles, since we brought him up first, but
Okay.
yeah, a little closer on Michael.
I really like Miles Bridges. I had him ranked, I think 9th or 10th in last year's draft class. Obviously, he went back to Michigan State. I think the potential there for Miles Bridges is huge. Really athletic, erratic shooter, but I think that the potential's there for him to be an outstanding two-way player. I think that once he learns to get some aggression to his game, get some confidence driving the lane. The one criticism I have is that he's not aggressive enough on the offensive end. I think with the athleticism he has, he could really hurt teams driving the ball. And I think that at the moment, he just doesn't have the confidence to do that. I mean, he's a second-year player coming out of college as opposed to a first. I think that extra experience will help. I think Michigan State's a really tough place to hone your craft as a legit NBA prospect at the moment. And I think that if he can get that aggression, I've just seen Baker Mayfield running down the field after he come back in. Threw me off guard there. I think if he learns to be aggressive, I think that the two-way potential there is huge. He doesn't get to the line. If he can get to the line and actually sink some free throws, I think, fantasy star, maybe not. Top 50 player, I definitely could see it, especially because I think he has the ability to contribute everywhere. Mikal Bridges, I just don't see the upside. He's a 3-year college player. Had I wouldn't say a complete outlier of a year last year. That would be unfair. But he was surrounded by fantastic players at Villanova. DiVincenzo, Brunson, Spellman. I think that helped him in college quite a bit last season, raising stock value. I don't think it's the ideal situation for him to go in Phoenix in the logjam, and in terms of player development either. I just don't see, in terms of the long term, I don't see where the fantasy sort of superstar potential's there. So it's a real lack of upside issue with me with Bridges. Probably a safe high floor play, but it's probably, it's a guy that I'm so much lower on that I'm not going to own him anywhere. What's your take with those guys then, Jordan?
Yeah, I'll go in the same order there. So for Miles Bridges, he comes in at 16 in my rankings. Where I talked a little bit earlier about the tiers, I would have him kind of placed in that same tier as the two guys ahead of him, Lonnie Walker and Zhaire Smith. I do prefer them just because I think they have a little bit more upside if we're talking long term. What that comes down to for me is I'm not sure how much the defensive stats are going to translate. Looking at what he did in college, playing a ton of minutes. He never was able to get, as a sophomore, he didn't get a 0.6 steals, 0.8 blocks. Came out to a 1.2 steal rate and a 2.5 block rate. I think the blocks could be more legit than the steals, but even then I'm not 100% sure that really translates as much. He is better than I thought he was coming out of college. He's a better shooter. I mean, the rebounding looks like it's going to translate right away. The field goal percentage in summer league was pretty rough. I want to say it was around 25%. He's a guy, though, that he could be a nice modern 3 or 4. He's a very, very explosive and strong athlete. That's like
I was going to say, I saw him do a quick putback jump, and he's got a quick step, quick to get super high. Like, he beat out other NBA guys. He was at the rim before them. It was pretty impressive.
Just to interrupt a second, Jordan, you're saying about the blocks here. I mean, this is probably where our biggest discrepancy comes. I see the potential there for the block numbers to increase, a bit like with Bagley in the NBA. 2 reasons. I think that when you saw him as a shot blocker in Michigan State, the timing, his athleticism, it really did play. Secondly, I mean, you got to remember who he was playing next to at Michigan State as well. He's playing next to Jaren Jackson Jr., wasn't he? And so I think the role that he was playing at Michigan State is very different to the role he's going to be playing in the NBA. I think that that they're going to find it difficult to find out initially whether he is going to be a true 3 or 4. But I think given the athleticism and his natural ability to block shots, that's a statistic that I could see, rise quite significantly from his college numbers. Is that a fair assessment?
I could see that. Yeah, that's a fair assessment. Like I said, I do believe in the blocks more than the steals. The one thing that kind of throws me is I do believe he's closer to, the 6'7", 6'8", as opposed to like that 6'10" he looks like when you just watch him, especially in summer league. He looked like a man amongst boys there, just physically. Like you said, explosive. So I don't know if he's, is he a 3? Is he a 4? Especially if he is a 4, I just don't know. He has the athleticism where I could definitely see those blocks translating. I'm not 100% sold on it, and I think that's probably, like you said, the biggest discrepancy between the two of us and why I have him just a little bit lower. But he did show in summer league that he had, pretty decent vision. He's not like a really big playmaker, but he's not a guy that I would be shocked if is, getting close to 2 assists per game in his prime, with some, decent points, rebounding, 3-point numbers. If the defense numbers come along, then, that's great. I'm just not quite as sold on those. Switching over to the other Bridges, Mikal Bridges, I got him at number 10. Like you said, I think he's a little bit safer. He really took his game to another level offensively as a junior. And so I don't think you're completely wrong in saying it was an outlier season for him. The rest of the numbers kind of stayed about the same, but he really did take on a lot more of the scoring and rebounding load as a junior. Jumped up to 17.5 points and 5.5 rebounds, which were both way, way career highs. The assists, steals, and blocks and threes all were, very close to similar. The threes went up quite a bit too. But looking like what he did as a junior, I'm big at looking at steal and block percentages. I think that kind of helps translate a little bit. He had a 2.7 steal percentage and a 3.5 block percentage as a junior. I'm looking at what they did over career. It was at 3.0 and 3.6 respectively. So I do think that those numbers are going to translate pretty much right away. He's kind of that modern 3-and-D mold. I think there's a good chance that TJ Warren gets traded at some point, and then you're looking, on the perimeter, you basically have Devin Booker coming back off his broken hand, and then just a stable of young guys where I don't really know what happens. But I do think that Bridges is a guy that is a nice fit for the modern game, and I think that he has not probably top 5 upside, but I wouldn't be. I think he's a safe bet for a surefire top 10 finish in this class when you're looking back 4 to 5 years from now.
Am I guilty of probably being lower on him because I just find him a bit boring? Does that make sense?
He's a very boring guy. I think his absolute upside is hoping for Robert Covington, absolute upside.
Yeah, I think that's.
He just doesn't have that crazy high ceiling, but hey, that's a good NBA career.
For sure.
I think it's important to remember as well. We're going through our rankings here. So these are not finished articles. A lot changes throughout a player's NBA career. Guys take a different time frames to develop. One of the guys I'm huge on this year, as Brent, is Malik Monk, and last year, he showed what he could do at the end of the season, but he's just that classic example. In the same way we talk about Trae Young, Aaron Holiday, a lot of these guys are very, very undersized, and it takes quite a long time for them to really learn how to play in the physicality and really utilize their strengths and their tools in the NBA. So when we do talk about guys like, Mikal Bridges and say that, it's a limited ceiling, or this guy, et cetera, there is a lot that can change. So, we can be wrong, is my point.
So one of the things we like to, I don't know, or maybe I like to end on is I'll sort of throw out a couple rapid fire choice questions to you guys.
Can I throw in one more player real quick?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. You're here to be our expert. Let's hear it.
I love that you call it expert. I love that.
No, what did you want to call it, Craig? Enthusiasts? Or
I prefer the term enthusiast.
Yeah.
But for me, that's Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Like I had mentioned, been higher on him in the whole pre-draft process, and it took about 2 minutes of watching a little bit of film again yesterday, and that's why I liked him in the pre-draft process. You have Sexton a few spots ahead of him. I just kind of curious what you like more about Sexton as opposed to Shai.
A couple of things really. I like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. I think that all three of the rookies, if you like, if we're discounting Wenyen and Gabriel out of it, in Diallo, Knox, and Shai, kind of were in a tough situation last year at Kentucky, and I think that Knox and Diallo especially really didn't do much to help their draft stock. I like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. The issues I have with him, I see the potential on the defensive end. I do think that the offensive game is a little bit predictable at this point. That's going to be found out at the NBA level. I'm not a big fan of his shot form. I think that the offensive ceiling for Sexton's higher. I think that the athleticism that Sexton got, Gilgeous-Alexander's a great athlete, don't get me wrong. I think Sexton is a tremendous athlete. I just think that the upside there, the potential to take it to the next level is higher for Sexton for me than what it is for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. And that isn't to knock Shai. I mean, he looked fantastic in Summer League. I mean, he probably had, in terms of, if you were to pick out a standout game from any player in the Summer League, he would have been the guy. His numbers were fantastic. I'm not yet a believer in the shot form. I think there's still some defensive naivety, although you can see the raw talent and potential there. And I think that the offense is a little bit predictable for me. That makes sense?
Yeah, no, that's completely fair. The one thing, I guess, just my only counter, comparing him to Sexton, is I think there's a better chance of the rebounding, assists, and steals numbers translating for Shai with Sexton. Yeah. But I do agree that Sexton is a guy that I think will elevate his game playing with better teammates, than what he had at Alabama for sure.
I think Sexton kind of is, I wouldn't say he's going a little bit under the radar, because he's not at all. I mean, because of the situation that he's been put into where, there is a path to playing time. But I think that there are some people that look at what he did at Alabama just from a statistical standpoint and undersell him a little bit. People try to use the field goal percentage in terms of, he's going to be an inefficient scorer. His shot form is much, much better than what any of that suggests. I agree in terms of assists and defensive numbers. I don't think Sexton's a big threat there. I just think that he does have the game that could take it to the next level, whereas I question that with Shai.
Yeah, he's definitely got, I would say, a higher upside, or higher absolute upside for Sexton as opposed to Shai.
Yeah, so that's where I stand between the two. And that isn't to, I like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander a lot. Don't get me wrong, I'm not putting a knock on him at all. I think when it comes to the top 10 guys, I'm kind of trying to reach for, looking for a superstar, if that makes sense, rather than a high floor play.
Yeah, I mean, that would make sense, where you have the Sexton and the Miles Bridges ahead of the Mikal and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. That kind of reflects that, so I could definitely see that.
Yeah.
So, real quick, guys, before I get to the quick answer thing, Michael Porter Jr., does he play this season? He's on a really deep team. Is his back injury going to limit him, or it seems like because of where you guys have him ranked that you're still feeling pretty positive about his career going forward? What's your thoughts really quick just on Michael Porter?
For me, you go ahead, Craig.
Oh, no, it's fine. I think Michael Porter Jr. could if the back plays up, he could be the best player in this draft class without any question. And the only thing that limits him, in my mind, is the health. It's last 6 years I've dealt with serious back injuries myself, operations, the lot. Quite similar problems to Michael Porter Jr. Obviously I'm not the kind of athlete that he is, so it's not fair to compare, but it's just about the back health. In terms of actual skill set, for me, it could be the best player in the draft. Ahead of Doncic, ahead of Ayton, JJJ. The ceiling is absolutely huge in my mind, and the game that he has with the athleticism, the length, it so fits for the modern NBA as well that I have no concerns there. But again, it's just that tentative. What's going to happen with the back? We've seen it all before. But I think I've stated before, I might have even stated in an article, in a position where I can stash Michael Porter Jr., I'm going to be really aggressive drafting him. But in leagues where I can't stash, it's difficult to use that roster spot, and that's where it comes down to for me, really.
Yeah, I would agree with basically everything there. You go back and look at Michael Porter Jr. when he was coming out of high school. He was the guy that was predicted to be the number one pick in this draft class. As far as do I think he plays this year? No, and if he does, it's just maybe a few minutes down the stretch. But looking down the road, I do think that he's if you told me in 3 years he was the number one, number two rookie in this class, I wouldn't be shocked at all. I do think that, that was absolute upside comparison to Kevin Durant. There is a little bit of validity to those when you just look at his playing style. If you've forgotten how good he is, just go back and look at some of his high school mixtapes, and you're talking about a guy that can do everything on the offensive end. I have no problem stashing him, with the back of the first round pick. But pre-draft process early on, I want to say I had him number 2 or 3. And then, more and more came out about that back and scared me down a little bit as someone who, as well as have had a little bit of a back issue myself with some herniated discs that required surgery on my end. So I do know in that sense, like just how hard that was for me to come back from, and I wasn't trying to play in the NBA after that. So there is definitely some risk involved with him, but overall, I'm very, very high on him still. I have no problem using a back of the first round pick on him.
Yeah, I remember when Cleveland traded Kyrie and got that pick, and a lot of people were like, maybe they can get Michael Porter Jr. with that pick, and they end up with Collin Sexton, which isn't a bad player, but maybe a couple of years they're going to regret.
That might be one of the biggest mistakes. That might be one of the biggest mistakes that Cleveland make was passing on Michael Porter Jr. I think. Position they were in, why not swing for the fences? Especially if you're going to get him at the rookie scale contract at 8th rather than sort of 1, 2, 3 overall. So, time will be the only teller, I think, on that one.
Yeah, ironically, it's funny. They ended up getting a much lower draft pick than they were kind of hoping when they got the Nets pick, because the Nets ended up being better than a lot of people thought, and they still had a shot at Michael Porter Jr. but didn't go.
Jerome Robinson over Michael Porter Jr. It made no sense.
Yeah,
I just
on that.
Denver is so set right now.
Well, the Clippers roster, with the depth that it's got, at least for this season.
Oh yeah, they would have been fun.
It lent itself to just draft Michael Porter Jr. Let's sit him out for a year. Let's see where we're at next year, and we've potentially got, in terms of skill level anyway, the best, if not one of the best players in the draft.
Well, it's not like Jerome Robinson is going to play.
Well, you say that, but he's not he's not coming out of college as a freshman. I mean, he's a three-year junior, wasn't
but
he?
I'm saying it's not anyone who's gonna play heavy minutes and change your season, where you couldn't just wait on Porter.
They clearly see something that I don't. In Jerome. It's not a guy that I'm high on. I just as an observation to pass on. I understand it's a gamble. I understand it was a deep class, but I just thought that the way that the Clippers were set up in the short term and the long term, it just absolutely reeked of. Just take Michael Porter Jr.
Yep.
But there you go. What was it? Son said the other week. You can't expect rational thought all the time from organisations. So,
you can't anticipate rational coaching or something.
But it's those things. It's those things that make you question. What do they know in those medical reports that we don't? So you've got to put that into some kind of consideration of, that there were teams that should have drafted him from a talent perspective and waited, but for some reason they didn't. So you do have that at the back of your mind. What do they know that we don't?
Time will tell. So just so I don't have to spend all day tomorrow editing this for YouTube. Let me do a quick back and forth. I had an idea for sort of like a speed round. So we're gonna go. Think of yourselves. You're in just a regular draft for this season. And you don't think about who you have in what position already or what your needs are. Just a 1-to-1 comparison. I'll name 2 guys. Tell me who you would draft this season. So I'll start with Jordan, and I'll say, Jordan, would you grab Mitchell Robinson or Mo Bamba this season?
For this year, I'll go Mitchell Robinson.
Craig?
Yeah, I agree. I think. I'm not as excited about Mo Bamba as most, and I think looking at Jordan's rankings, he's on the same boat as well. I don't believe in the offensive potential that others seem to, and I think the whole improved jump shot is a bit of a fallacy, in my opinion.
All right, so Craig, how about Jaren Jackson Jr. or Wendell Carter Jr.? This season.
For this season?
Yep.
For this season, give me Wendell Carter Jr. for this season, but it's close. I think that I'm a little bit concerned in the short term about Jaren Jackson Jr.'s potential or offensive potential in the short term. I think in terms of upside, it's as high as anyone in this class for JJJ. I'm not as bullish on most thinking that the offense is going to translate immediately.
Jordan?
I'm actually right there with him. I have, for 1 year, we'll go Wendell Carter just because I think that he has a better chance of getting, 20-plus minutes a game off the bench, maybe even locking down that starting job. The Grizzlies already said they're going to try and bring Triple J along a little bit slower. So I think for this year, you're going to go Wendell Carter Jr., but if we're talking Dynasty, I have Triple J clear tier ahead of Wendell Carter.
All right, Jordan, Marvin Bagley or Kevin Knox?
Ooh, Bagley. I think that there's a good chance that Bagley is the starter by the end of the year. If nothing else, those points and rebounds are going to translate, and I do think, like Craig said, there's the potential for those defensive numbers to come up. So I'll go Bagley.
Craig, Bagley or Knox?
I'll stick with Bagley as well. I like Knox. I think that the opportunity is going to be there for Knox to shine. I think New York are desperate for him to really prove what he can do early, get the fans on board. The Knicks Nation seem to be excited about him, but I do worry. I worry about the efficiency for Knox out the gate from a field goal percentage point of view, and I think that that's going to be just as much of a negative as Bagley's field goal free throw percentage. And I kind of like a bit of I like the numbers elsewhere better for Bagley, so I'll take Bagley.
Okay, last one. I'll start with Jordan. Who has the best fantasy season this year between Doncic, Ayton, and Trae Young?
This year, I want to say Doncic, but if I was putting money on it, I'd say probably Ayton. I think that he could have an Enes Kanter type season where he's challenging for the top 50, top 60, even with a lack of elite defensive numbers. But I do think that he could challenge for a block per game. But I think he's going to come in and get rebounds and score some buckets right away. So I'll say Ayton if we're going year one.
Craig?
Okay, I think it's close for year one. I think that both have a high enough floor to fully warrant where they're being drafted in leagues, their current ADP at the moment. But I like the situation for Doncic. I think that, his ability to create on the perimeter is going to translate well in terms of fantasy. I like the personnel that's around him. I think the Mavs are going to be good for him. So I think it's close, but for the point of being subjective and differing, let's go Doncic.
All right, guys, thank you so much for taking the time. Jordan, especially Jordan Schultz with #basketball.com. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. Our own Craig Bozic, fantasy dynasty expert, enthusiast at Razzball.com. Jordan, can we find you on Twitter?
Yes, you can. I actually just deleted all my other social media, so that's the only place you can find me now. You can get me there at Dyno, DYNO, NBA. I'm definitely that lame dude that has NBA in his Twitter handler, one of those blog boys, but I wear it with pride.
But those meta tags.
Yeah, exactly. But find me there. Definitely subscribe to the Razzball Fantasy Podcast. Subscribe to my #Dynasty Fantasy Basketball Podcast and check out my ranks. I will have a fresh set, or not a fresh set, but a fresh update coming out right before the season starts. I'm just finishing up my new rookie ranks, and then I'll switch over and get those contending and rebuilding ranks.
Yeah, once training camp starts and those depth charts start coming out, those rankings can adjust quite a bit, so you definitely want to pay attention. Thank you so much, Jordan. Craig, Storytelling41 on Twitter.
That's the one. Yeah, the usual place. Storytelling41. Just the usual, bits about baseball and basketball, I guess. I only use it for sports, so not a lot's happening at the moment outside of just waiting for the season. Got an industry mock draft starting on Saturday that will be focusing just on dynasty leagues, so from a dynasty perspective. So if you're a dynasty guy, check out the results from that. We've got some some pretty high profile and some guys you probably not heard of, but I like to read their stuff and like their output as well. So and we'll have the Razzball projections up soon, so see who the writers have predicted for the breakouts, sleepers, busts, etc. So I'll have that one out soon as well. So lots going on.
And we got and Razzball, Craig wrote quite a few of these. We have our team previews going up. So I'll link everything down below, all of Jordan's information, the #basketball information, Twitter handles. Like and subscribe, leave comments. I'll put questions in there just to stir up some conversation, get into the debate about these rookies. I know we always have fun. We go, over an hour every week talking about this stuff. So super excited to have Jordan here joining us. Pay attention for everything. I'm Brent at the Fantasy Dick on Twitter. Signing off.